As always, I'd love to thank our sponsors without whom this event would not be possible: Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Karyopharm Therapeutics, AbbVie, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Genentech, Oncopeptides, and Takeda Oncology. Well, today is, like I said, going to be more of an interactive group discussion. Both Rosalind and I will be speaking to you throughout the meeting on this topic. So I thought I'd give you a little introduction to myself and to Roz, and I want to start with Roz. Rosalind Height is the Myeloma Coach Director, and she is the wife of myeloma patient Richard Height. Rosalind worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years as an occupational therapist. She is passionate about sharing resources and education that help individuals improve the quality of their lives. She and her husband are the parents of 3 busy, active teenagers. As for myself, my name is Audrey Burton-Bethke. I am the Myeloma Crowd Community Manager, as I mentioned, and I am the daughter, niece, and granddaughter of cancer survivors. My paternal grandma passed away from lung cancer 2 years ago, and my abuela, or grandma, is currently receiving treatment for vaginal cancer. Although I never heard of myeloma before joining this foundation, I have worked extremely hard to educate myself about the disease and also learned through the vulnerable experiences that you're brave enough to share with me. I truly believe my purpose in life is to help people and serve people, as I said in that video before we started. And this job brings a truly beautiful opportunity for me to accomplish that purpose. So today's topic is going to be the Caregiver's Care Team. A study was recently brought to my attention that absolutely floored me, the data that it shared. And for those of you who attended last month, you might remember Katie. Katie was talking to us about proper nutrition, but she is the one that brought this study to my attention. When she gave me full access to the article, the data collected, like I said, fascinated me and left me with the question, why aren't we doing more for caregivers? I've been thinking a lot in preparing for this meeting about how I wanted to shape the discussion. I want to start out by saying that because every myeloma patient's journey is different, therefore every myeloma caregiver's journey is also going to be different. I think it depends on a lot of factors like comorbidities of the patient or you as the caregiver, and what kind of myeloma do they have? Is it aggressive or is it not? Is it high risk? Did they get a stem cell transplant? Did they not? So our experiences, like I said, are going to vary. Even though we're just a small group here, I'm sure that each of us have unique experiences. But while we each have those, that unique journey, I think there's a lot of shared experiences within that unique journey. And for that reason, I wanted to bring this data to your attention. I wanted to have this discussion because I believe that when we come together, we're going to be able to take steps and create resources that will help us prevent caregiver health decline, which is extremely important. There wouldn't really be a cure, to be honest, without caregivers. Obviously without doctors and all of those who are working, but the caregivers play a big role in helping the patient stay as healthy as possible. Let's start by talking about the article. So I'm actually going to include this in the chat, and I meant to put it in there earlier, but I forgot. So I'm going to be doing that right now. Just because I want you guys to have reference to what I'm talking to, I'll also include it in the follow-up email that we'll send within 48 hours of this event's conclusion. But no, I lost you guys, couldn't find you. But like I said, this article was very interesting to me. A full, I guess a warning, I don't know if warning's the right word, but this article is, I'll say, pessimistic. And I wish they would have done a little bit better job of kind of finding the balance between what's good and not good. But I understand also that the authors were trying to bring across a point of caregivers need to practice self-care, both physically and emotionally. So later in the program, I want to touch on that thought of how caregiving has benefited your life, but I think we'll start with some of the ugly parts first. So the first thing that struck me in the article that I wanted to share was the section called Caregivers Suffer from High Levels of Stress and Frustration. Now, for most, if not all of you, that's kind of a duh statement. Like, of course, Audrey, taking care of somebody you love and watching them suffer is going to obviously bring higher levels of stress and frustration into your life. But the results of the studies, and something that I wanted to touch upon, were they went into this a little bit more in depth. So let's start with emotional health and what the research says. Caregivers have higher levels of stress than non-caregivers. They also describe feeling frustrated, angry, drained, guilty, or helpless as a result of providing care. Some 16% of caregivers feel emotionally strained, and 26% say taking care of the care recipient is hard on them emotionally. And an additional 13% of caregivers feel frustrated with the lack of progress being made with the care recipient. Caregiving can also result in a feeling of loss of self-identity, lower levels of self-esteem, constant worry, or feelings of uncertainty. Caregivers have less self-acceptance and feel less effective and less in control of their lives than non-caregivers. More than a fifth of caregivers are exhausted when they go to bed at night, and many feel they cannot handle all their caregiving responsibilities. Caregivers who experience chronic stress may be at a greater risk for cognitive decline, including loss in short-term memory, attention, and verbal IQ. So this is kind of where our group discussion starts, and I'm willing to repeat any of those statements that I just made, but I'm curious and would love to open it up to the group if any of those statements resonated with you. And it might be kind of nerve-wracking to share your thoughts in front of this group of strangers. I feel like for me it is a little bit. But I know that one of the ways that we're going to be able to prevent caregiver health decline is by creating a support system. And this is a great first step, I think, in creating a care team for the caregiver and sharing experiences together. So
Hi, Audrey. This is Ron Stevens in
Hey, Ron.
Raleigh. I'll start it off. I'm not very
Perfect.
bashful.
Thank you.
So I'm actually surprised that the percentages are not higher.
Yeah.
I consider myself to be a relatively strong, stable person, but I can say I have experienced every one of those emotions and challenges and sense of exhaustion. My wife was diagnosed in 2018. We've been through the stem cell. She is one with high risk, and we actually received very good news today from her 6-month bone marrow biopsy, and it was great news. I mean, it was fantastic news, and yet we both were commenting at just how exhausted we feel. We kind of hugged and high-fived, and then it was just like boom. And so I can certainly, as a caregiver, validate those feelings, and frankly, I'm surprised that it's not higher.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I agree. When I was typing this up, it really does surprise me. I think it's this Family Caregiver Alliance there in San Francisco, and they do caregivers of all kinds, so like dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer, etc. And I too was surprised that the percentages actually weren't higher, so thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else have something they would like to share? And also, oh, hold on. My computer's being weird. Also, I see people raising their hands and using the chat. That's perfect. That's exactly what I would love to see here. So Nancy, would you like to speak? I think you're muted, Nancy, so make sure to unmute yourself. Let's see, let me stop sharing so I can see you guys better. All right, Nancy, I can't see you. It's just a red screen, but if you want to, I think she left and we'll come back in, so we'll see. I did see something in the chat. Randy is a member of the, oh, I get it. Her support group is the thing that shows up, but she can relate to the stress symptoms. Her mom lives with us and is smoldering with, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but myeloid dysplastic syndrome, and the frustration is real. Yeah, I think I really resonated with the one where it said the constant worry and feelings of uncertainty. Like, I'm even gonna probably be a little emotional and vulnerable with you guys here because I've had a rough caregiver day today. But I was with my abuela this morning and we had chemo all day on Tuesday, and then today she was just in so much pain and they did radiation. Her cancer is obviously in a very sensitive spot with vaginal cancer, and just seeing someone who's been so strong, like suffer so much, it was really hard. But then after that, you talk to the doctor and he talks about risks of procedures that are coming up. And then after that, I went to Walgreens and had to pick up her stuff. And then I had to teach her how to use when to take the prescriptions and how to use the creams. And then I have to make meals for her next week. And I mean, it's great. I love my abuela and I do anything for her, but I don't think my burden's any heavier than anybody else's, but I think it's good to recognize that caregiving comes with heavy responsibilities and our life doesn't stop. It's something that's added to our life that we have to carry. And today I had to remind myself that it's okay to have heavy days. It's okay to have those heavy days. I don't know if anybody else wants to share. Nancy, I see you. So do you want to, I hear you as well. So do you want to share with us?
Okay. Over the last 10 years, I was not only dealing with my husband's myeloma and several of his other medical problems. And I think that for us who are older, there's often a whole mix of things that we're juggling as far as, the diagnoses and the medications and the issues. But I was also a caregiver for my parents as they were getting up into their 90s and having issues. And I was trying to do it remotely or running back and forth about 250 miles every 3 or 4 weeks. And I literally was questioning whether I was having, I was, at my age, you might have trouble finding words sometimes, bringing them up as quickly as you want and stuff like that. But I was having a lot of the kind of thing where I just couldn't remember whether it was yesterday or the day before or today that I did something. I wasn't keeping track of things well with my short-term memory. Mm-hmm. And I literally went to a psychoneurologist and got tested because I was that worried about it.
Yeah.
So, and it did improve actually after both of my parents, ended their journey, and that's been a couple years now. And it was, but the whole combination of things. And I'm sure for younger people, it's the combination of maybe having children and a parent who's needing attention. And so it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it brings up the reason why the caregivers also need a care team, because it literally is affecting us not only emotionally, but physically as well. So before I move into the parts of the study that talk about how how caregivers are at risk for physical health decline, does anybody else want to share? You can raise your hand using the raise hand button, or you can type in the chat. Roz?
Yeah, I just had a thought. I'm curious if people have felt even an increase the last year with the pandemic adding on, like more worry and concern, and if that has just felt even heavier in your lives. I'm just curious. I know I've felt much more worry and concern. I'm just curious if anyone else has too, just related to that. I feel like that's just kind of complicated our journey even more.
Yeah. I see Barb raised her hand. Barb, do you want to speak to the group?
Sure, I'm not going to put my camera on because I've been working in the garden, but I can relate to everything you guys have been saying. My husband was diagnosed in 2018 as well, but before that, I had, since 2000, basically, I'd taken care of my mother until she died in 2019. And by 2018, when my husband was diagnosed, I was so tired. And when we got this diagnosis, I came home and stomped my foot because it was, I just said, I can't handle any more of this. And I'm a caregiver type person. I've seemed to be the one who takes that responsibility. So I can relate to everything you guys are saying, like you going, after you take care of the person, then you've got to go to the pharmacy. Then you have to teach them how to use it. And will they understand and will they use it? And you have to make the calls to the doctor. And it's not easy. And honestly, I let myself go because I didn't want to go to another doctor's appointment, only to find out recently that I have CAD, which is cardiovascular artery disease, which I'm not overweight. I don't have any comorbidities for that except genetics. My father died at 54, so that was a shock, but I didn't go to the doctor to keep track of myself. So I think you're right. Caregivers need help, and I think we really need to be aware of taking care of ourselves, because if we don't, the cortisol levels are high, it causes damage in our bodies, and people don't understand why we're tired. So anyway, I don't mean to go on and on in a rant, but I'm really thankful for this group because I've been involved in another caregivers group that never talked about how everybody was feeling. We only talked about our significant others. And so thank you. It's really good to hear that you're not alone is I guess what I ultimately want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb, for validating, our experiences as well as we do that. So she brings up a good point, and I'm sorry to use you as a example because I'm sorry that you're suffering through all of this stuff, but that's exactly what the research says is going to happen if we don't take care of ourselves. So let's talk about, oh, I'm on the wrong one. Let's talk about physical health. So I'm going to read the stats and then see if this resonates with any of you. But it says that 1 in 10 caregivers, and again, Ron, I agree, these are low percentages that I think would actually be a lot higher if we reevaluated. But about 1 in 10 caregivers report that caregiving has caused their physical health to get worse. Caregivers reported chronic conditions like heart disease, cancers, diabetes, and arthritis at nearly twice the rate of non-caregivers. This might be due to the fact that studies demonstrate that caregivers have diminished immune response, which leads to frequent infection and increased risk of cancers. 60% of caregivers reported fair or poor health status, 1 or more chronic conditions, or a disability, compared with 30% of non-caregivers. Caregivers exhibit exaggerated cardiovascular responses to stressful conditions, which put them at greater risk than non-caregivers for the development of cardiovascular syndromes, such as high blood pressure or heart disease. And I found it interesting that caregivers were also reported to have slower wound healing than non-caregivers. In terms of preventive health, caregivers are less likely to engage in preventive health behaviors. Spousal caregivers, and I would even say, the study was spousal, but I would say any kind of caregiver who provides more than 36 hours a week or more of care are more likely to consume saturated fat. And I'll admit, I laughed when I read this one because I was thinking about all those bags of chips that I stress eat, when I'm feeling nervous. So I am part of that statistic. Caregivers are twice as likely not to fill a prescription because of the cost than non-caregivers. Nearly 3/4 of caregivers reported that they had not gone to the doctor as often as they should, and more than half had missed doctor's appointments. Caregivers' self-care suffers because they lack the time and the energy to prepare proper meals or exercise. About 6 in 10 caregivers in a national US survey reported that their eating, at 63% reporting that it was worse, and their exercise at 58% reporting it was worse, say that it's worse than before. So I'll open up the discussion again if any of those resonated with you, or if there's anybody that hasn't shared yet that wants to share their experience, and then we can move on to the more proactive, so what can we do? All right. Andy, would you like to speak? Let me stop sharing again.
All right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate those stats. And one of the things, well, two things jump out for me. One, I'm fortunate. My wife is a 12-year multiple myeloma, stem cell transplant, and then, on and off chemo since then. And we're entering a little bit of an uncharted territory at this point. But one of the things I've always felt that I could do best, and I've tried to do, and it's in line with your statistics there, is to do whatever I can to make sure that I'm going to be there physically, emotionally, where I can. I try and eat very well. I exercise a lot. And I'm not saying I'm doing great at it, but my point is your stats there resonate with me, because I really do feel that's ultimately the best thing that I can do, is to stay healthy myself and to be there, for my wife. So I really work hard at doing that. I could always improve, but I just recognize how important that is, that I need to be there.
Yeah,
whatever that means.
So if you don't mind me just jumping in, what have you done for exercise and nutrition? How have you had people on your team to help you, or what have you been doing?
Well, actually, most of it's myself. I've placed a pretty high value on that for quite a while. I think I eat very well. I exercise religiously every day. You mentioned the pandemic. I mean, I go out on my bicycle for an hour and a half, riding virtually every day outside. And I make sure I get that kind of time. If I don't get that kind of time, I'm just not going to be very helpful for people, for my wife or anybody. So I really try and work very, very hard, very, very disciplined. I always have been about exercise and about eating as well as I can. And again, it just gets back to, I felt from the beginning that the best thing that I could do would be to be there, and to make sure I was healthy. And then that's how I could be most helpful.
I really like that. Go ahead, Ron.
I was just going to say walks or jogging or just kind of some alone time is always valuable. And anytime I do some physical activity, exercise, it makes a difference. It really does. And I would agree too with eating right. I have, just done the much lower carbs, and I just feel better. And I have to say that that piece of it, not having to worry about that, not having to be, feeling sluggish and yucky because I'm not in any sort of shape, makes a difference. And that is a help. And again, just the actual physical, either whether it's a walk or a jog, just is really therapeutic.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that's common in what both of you guys said is you have to make yourself a priority in a way. You have to carve that time out. You have to dedicate yourself to the healthier diet. And it's important to have, as silly as it sounds, it's important to have ourselves on that caregiver's care team, that we are rooting for our own health. We are rooting for we are advocating for our own self-care. I think that's super important. So thank you both for sharing. Nancy. Oh, Nancy, you're muted. Sorry. I wish I could unmute people, but that's one thing that Google doesn't let me do, unfortunately. Nancy, it's on the screen where everyone is at the bottom. It's the microphone button.
Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to do it up in the little tile at the top.
I know. It's yeah, Google Meet changes every week. You're good.
Okay. I had an interesting experience this week with a patient of mine that I'm a myeloma coach for, who's a younger man in his 30s. And he not only is a myeloma patient getting actively treated, but he is also a caregiver for a parent with cancer. And he just got full custody of his 2 teenage children. And this week he just got overwhelmed, but he handled it really perfectly. He asked his sisters for some help. He called his doctors. He got connected to a therapist at his cancer center, and he's doing better. But, you know, he did a good job of reaching out and getting support.
That's awesome. I admire him for that. That's a lot on his plate. And thank you for helping him, Nancy, as his coach. Just a couple notes in the chat that I'd like to mention, and then we can move on. Dolores said that her doctor told her to take care of her physical health or she would be unable to help her husband. I agree. She says it makes a lot of sense, and she makes exercise a priority every day. And then Randy says, part of my care team is my Tai Chi group. We have met virtually for the past year. However, my exercise frequency has suffered. It's harder to fit into the schedule. And that's kind of how I would agree as well. I think carving time for exercise and healthy eating, preparing meals, I resonate with. I don't really have a lot of time or energy to be eating, and those can be excuses. And so I'm grateful for the nutrition and wellness chapter that we also have, where we have experts come and talk to us about eating healthy. But anyway, thank you all for your great comments. I was a little bit nervous, I'll be honest, before we started this today. I'm like, what if nobody talks? So I really appreciate your contributions so far. So this is the part that I'm not most excited about, but I'm excited about as we grow together. You know, reading this, my personality says, okay, these are alarming statistics and they're probably higher than what's being reported, but what can we do about it? You know, where does my advocacy, my responsibility, where does that come in? So we stress the importance of a multiple myeloma specialist, a social worker, and other stellar healthcare professionals for the patient. But studies like the ones that we just talked about and the data that we read tells me we need, like I said in the beginning, we need to be doing something more. So what can we do to build the care team for the caregiver? Who is on the team and how can we grow it? And the way that I thought we could do this together, and this is a little unconventional, you know, I kind of am winging this as I go, but I thought it would be fun. I don't know if fun's the right word. I thought it would be beneficial for us to, that might be a little too zoomed in, for us to talk about who we want on our team. So this is just a little Google Doc that I made, and I'll download it when we finished and include it in that follow-up email. But I want to talk about who are people that the caregivers can have on their team in order to prevent health decline for the caregivers. Okay, so I'd love to hear your input. And just as, just so you know, I've separated it into 4 different sections: emotional team, physical team, intellectual team, and more team members. I can explain those a little bit as we go on. But Ron, how will you start us off? Who is helpful to have on our team?
So I would just like to recognize the group that we have here tonight. as people who are undergoing the same journey and having the same challenges, it's refreshing is not the right word, but it gives credence to the feelings that you're having, and that they're not unique, and that they're not unusual, or that you have to do something specifically for them. Recognizing that they're the result of what we're going through, what we're experiencing, is reassuring for me. I can speak only for myself, but having the ability to hear that others are feeling these same things, it for whatever reason, it does give me some condolence, and so having peers undergoing similar circumstances, they don't have to be exactly the same. I think that is by far and away a very helpful group that I would like to have on my team.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. Anybody else? Nancy?
Well, we have the myeloma coaches, of whom I am one, and, it indicates whether, we're a caregiver or a patient. And there's nothing wrong with caregivers having a coach who's also a caregiver. So that's an option, I believe.
Yeah.
And then, I also, meet on a weekly basis with a church group that is a Bible study. And, those people have been of help. Last year when we came home and we were supposed to, we flew in and we were supposed to quarantine because of flying in. And, one of the members of that group volunteered to take our rental car back and to buy groceries for us and so forth. And I know those people would be there, when I need something.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. For those who are unfamiliar with the Myeloma Coach Program, after we are creating, or actually, you know what, Roz, how about you take the time now as we're talking about it to share. So I introduced her at the beginning, but Rosalind Height is the Myeloma Coach Program Director within the HealthTree Foundation, and she also is the caregiver for her husband, Richard, who's a myeloma patient. So Roz, do you want to share with us?
Yeah. So first, I'm just honored to be here. And Audrey asked me to share some of my experiences with being a caregiver for my husband and gathering a team. As Audrey mentioned, and we've just been talking, being a caregiver really does take its toll. And it's so important that we take care of ourselves. And when my husband was diagnosed, I'm sure like all of you, I quickly began gathering a team of professionals to help him, right? So we got our myeloma specialist and we made relationships with the nurses and met the social worker. I was so worried about him and so focused on him, and really creating that team brought me comfort and security. And I tried getting some support for myself, talking to family members and friends. And sometimes I was even introduced to other caregivers. People start coming out of the woodwork, as you know. And that was helpful generally, but we were into different phases of life and there were missing pieces of it. And it was just such a scary and overwhelming time that I did feel pretty isolated. And my husband was going through transplant and had some complications, and I was outside the hospital sitting one day and ran into the social worker, and she asked me how we were doing, and I shared what was happening along with some of my own worries and fears. And she said, it's not all about him. And at first I was so taken back, like how rude, like, of course it's about him. It's all about him right now. He's recovering from transplant. And it took some time for that to sink in with me. But then I realized she was right. It wasn't just about him, but when someone that we love is facing something this big, it feels selfish to think about ourselves, but it's not. And I'm grateful for that lesson that she taught me that day, because it's something that I still remind myself of today as I'm going through different phases of this journey, that I have needs too, right? And So as I look back at that time where I was trying to help him gather that team and those things that I tried, I tried to attend a support group. I went to a support group, but it was general and not myeloma related. And most of the resources that I found were more general and weren't specific to myeloma. And as we all know, myeloma is so different and just brings such unique challenges that it was hard. And I wish that I would have been able to talk to someone who could relate, who also had young children at home and was preparing for transplant with young children at home, who was trying to balance work and being a caregiver, someone close to my age to talk about the worries and the fears, the unknown, and learn how I could deal with those challenges. And no matter what phase of life we're in, it's helpful to talk to someone in that phase, right? So depending on the circumstances are different, but the needs are the same. And even now, we're 6 years into this journey and in a different phase of our journey, and I still long for and need someone to talk to who can relate to what I'm experiencing at this point. And each of us are so different with our own personal needs, and I think it's so important that we don't minimize those needs. I find myself doing that a lot, minimizing the needs that I have. But we really need to find our own team. And I love that Audrey's doing this so that we can start to look at what are our emotional needs, our physical needs, and who could we put on that team? Because myeloma, as we all know, is ongoing and there's different phases and each phase brings its own set of challenges. As I look back and at those specific needs I had, I wish I had a myeloma coach. And Nancy's referenced her role as a coach. And I'm not just saying that because I'm involved with the coach program, but I wish I would have had a coach for my husband and a coach for me. We had people that we were talking to and people that even had myeloma, and that was helpful, but we didn't have anyone that we could call back again and have an ongoing supportive relationship with. And that's what sets the myeloma coach program apart is all the coaches are either patients or they're caregivers that want to give back by sharing what they've learned to help others. And that's what Nancy does, sharing her experience, and it helps others. And I love that story you shared, Nancy, that the gentleman that you're coaching is doing this. Like he has developed these skills and likely gained some of that from you because you're so wise that he does need to gather that team. So it really is a great resource, and I love it and wish I had it because it is personalized, where you can just have a relationship with someone and call them and be able to sort through it and talk through it, or email or text or be in person, whatever it is that works for you. So we did want to share that as a resource tonight, and I'll just give a brief overview, Audrey. I don't know how in depth. I won't go super in depth, but a lot of you on the call are familiar with the program and already involved in it. But for those that aren't, it's a program through the foundation and it's all online. And how it works is individuals that are interested in being a coach create a profile and they share the areas they have experience in. If they've helped their loved one through stem cell transplant, if they've gained experience with financial resources or insurance, navigating Medicaid or Medicare, physical, mental, or emotional health, becoming your best advocate, even experience with specific treatments that they've had that they could share with you. And they also share a little bit about their specific personal myeloma journey and their location. And so those interested in working with the coach can go in. Once you register, you can view all those coaches' profiles, and then you can find someone that you think would be a good match for you, depending on what phase of the journey you're in, depending on what phase of life you're in, depending on what needs or questions that you have. And then you can connect with them through the website. It sends them your request, and then they reach out to you in the ways that in the communication methods you prefer. And you can list those, whether it's email, like I said, email, text, video chat, in person, on the phone. And then the relationship is just established between the two of you. Whether, I have one coach and she has a woman that's living alone and has felt really isolated through COVID, and she calls her every Sunday and talks to her, and that really helps her, and it works for that coach, and it really helps that individual just to feel supported. Others maybe just keep in touch every so often. Nancy said she had this gentleman reach out because he's going through kind of a crisis and needed some help. So it depends on what the needs are, and you can establish that. But it's just a great resource, and we want you all to be aware of it. So if it's something that would be beneficial to you, that you can use it and find the personalized one-on-one support. Because, like Ron said, this is so great to be able to personally connect like this. And if you want to take it one step further and just talk one-on-one, you can. So
Awesome. Yeah, Ross, that was a perfect explanation. That's awesome. Thank you.
And they're like, are you crazy? Are you crazy? He's like, how many people you know?
I'm not sure what that was. Okay, so thank you, Ross, for that. I also did want to mention it is 100% free. We get that question a lot.
Yes.
All of our resources are completely free to you. If you are interested, we will be sending out more in that follow-up email that I mentioned. We send it to all the registrants. If you're not interested, that's okay too. Like Ross said, we just wanted to make it available. In terms of our physical team, I'd love to hear what you guys think, especially as we talked about the physical risk that we're at. Would it be beneficial to kind of check in with a cardiologist once a year and just say, I'm a caregiver under high stress and I'd like to just be checked out, make sure everything's okay? Or even because caregivers are at a higher risk for cancers, do we go get screened and just check that everything's okay? What's your guys' opinion on that? And who do you feel like we need on our physical team?
Excuse me. I think it was Ron or Andy just saying that they just are proactive at taking care of their physical health, like getting an annual physical and having those appointments for yourself. That would be on your physical team, just keeping up with those regular doctor visits. And this isn't on the physical team, but back to the emotional team, I guess. Nancy referenced the young man that she's coaching and that he reached out to a counselor for himself. Mm-hmm. So on that, a lot of times we think of just, friends, family, or support groups, but also we don't need to be afraid to take to utilize professional help ourselves, because
Oh, well, I've experienced this in terms of I schedule a physical, and I had a physical scheduled in May, and we had an appointment for my wife that came up and it conflicted for that same day. Well, I rescheduled, and of course, for what a physical apparently is, that's optimum real estate on a physician's schedule. So it got moved all the way to August. So, that's quite a few months to push that off. And, and for at my age, a physical is, it's important that you do them. Things happen you don't realize, and you're obviously, to your point, at higher risks for different things. But it's just a function of how the world is. And, when I first saw that statistic, I was a little surprised. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, that's actually happened to me. So, yeah.
I think physicals, health screenings, all those, being proactive with those things.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, like you say, it can be hard because we're making appointments for our loved one, and then it's like, oh, I don't have the energy to make appointments for myself, but it's important.
Yeah, for sure. Nancy, and then after Nancy, Andy.
Well, I think we've all learned probably that with myeloma patients, you need to be proactive, you need to be knowledgeable, you need to be on top of things. And you can't forget that you have to do the same thing for yourself. You need to know what, for your age, what preventive screenings and so forth are recommended. You need to know what immunizations are recommended, because that's so important for your spouse or whoever the myeloma patient is too, because you don't want to catch something and give it to them. So, you need a good doctor. If you don't have somebody that's on top of things and, really doing the right job for you, you need to look for somebody else. And often, rather than a general physician, it might be a board certified internist or something.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great comment. Thank you, Nancy, for bringing that up. Andy?
Yeah, actually not much more to add to what Ron and Nancy said, but I have noticed recently, again, as we get further along in this journey with my wife, that I am more conscious of my own health and the need to get on things right away. In the past, I would tend to put my stuff on the back burner. I just kind of work myself through it, I'll get over it, whatever. But now if I feel something in my body or whatever, I notice I'm much quicker to make the appointment to go check it out, and knock on wood, things have been fine. But part it's spurred by the emotional message that, I really need to, again, stay on top of myself. Otherwise, I'm going to be not very good for my spouse, So
Yeah.
it's been helpful. The process is helpful just to drive me to take better care of myself. And that means the physical appointments with the doctors and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. An intellectual team, I was wondering whether or not to even put this section, but then I thought of, we have a myeloma financial coach. Her name is Diana Valentine, and working with her has taught me so much about what's important. And one of the things, not only the financial coach is talks about, how to pay for medications and how to cover out-of-pocket costs through scholarships and other grants and funds, but she gave a really good discussion about estate planning. And in addition to estate planning, wills and powers of attorney, which is something that, quite frankly, I hadn't thought about before and I didn't want to think about. But I realized the importance of it as she was speaking. And another important thing she mentioned was, you don't need to have lots of money in order to having an estate plan doesn't mean you have a lot of money, and having a will doesn't mean you have this fortune that you're leaving to somebody. But if you don't do it right, you run the risk of the government getting it, or it falling into unwanted hands. And I'm not trying to say this to scare anyone, and obviously I do not have as much knowledge as my Myeloma financial coach, but I would put on the intellectual side of things, it is helpful to have a financial advisor on your team for those things that maybe you're not thinking about or considering, but that are very important that come up. And there are decisions that you have to make beforehand as the caregiver, especially what happens when your loved one is on life support. Have you talked about it beforehand, about what they want happened, and are you ready to respect their wishes? And it becomes complicated, and it's a very sensitive topic, but it's something that's important, I think, to discuss with our loved ones. So I don't know if you guys have anything else on the intellectual team, or perhaps something that I've been forgetting here. Oh my goodness. Anyway, trying to make that pretty, it didn't work. But what other thoughts do you guys have in terms of either what I just said or creating the team in general? Nancy.
Well, part of that whole thing, would be a lawyer probably. Although if things are very simple, you can, sometimes manage them with an online service that's pretty inexpensive. But if you're doing things like creating a trust and powers of attorney and so forth, a lawyer is often someone that you need.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Also, I wanted to mention, if you don't feel comfortable speaking in front of everyone, we still would really love to hear your thoughts in the chat. So feel free to use the chat as well to share. Ron?
It's just interesting that we're talking about this, because I can tell you less than a week ago, it just wouldn't have been a topic that I would have been comfortable talking about. It has a finality about it, and it just, it's an uncomfortable topic, at least for me, and I would suspect for my wife as well. But today we got the bone biopsy results, and they were very positive, and so now it's like, okay, let's talk about what the next steps are and what we have to be prepared for. And so it feels like a different thing that we're doing. It's not doing it because we have to. It's now we're doing it because it's an appropriate step, and it does make absolute sense to do it now versus when you are in a crisis situation and you have to make these types of decisions. So I'm glad you brought it up. I wasn't really thinking about it, but as it was mentioned and as Nancy pointed out, I think it would be appropriate to get with a lawyer and have that conversation and put something together.
It's a gift. It truly is a gift to yourself and to your loved one. It is uncomfortable, but it will be a gift. So thank you for sharing that.
Audrey, I had something. As I'm looking at this, I'm just realizing, as I was preparing my notes for today, thinking back about the security it brought me to have that team for my husband, but also looking at this, I'm like, oh, if we had all these things in order, wouldn't it just bring us so much comfort and security to just feel like there's order in our lives, just like you say, whether it's financially or with those trust and, your will and trust and all those important documents and things like that, and just your own care team. It would bring a lot of security that you have people to call. I know you have order in your own life, right?
Yeah. Andy?
So one of the things that really attracted me to this event was just the words caregiver team. And one of the things that I'm really don't do a very good job on is developing my own personal network of team friends that I can and that I should spend time with. And it isn't time so they can give me support dealing with multiple myeloma or whatever. It's also just to have a regular, normal interaction with people who are involved in the world and talk about other things. So it's both personal support for what I'm going through and experiencing, but also just maintaining a presence in life. And I can get my exercise in. I do that really well, and I can shop, all this kind of thing. But one of the things that I don't do as well is take advantage of friends and friends in the community that spending time with them would really be helpful for me emotionally and good for me and make me feel, I'm not just, my wife and I aren't just in this cocoon of dealing with multiple myeloma, that I also have a personal life and, a life outside. It gives me some encouragement to keep to the task inside, So I need to do a better job. I like the notion, and maybe that's under the emotional team, but your use of the caregiver team really jumped out at me. And it's why I joined this today, because I need to do a better job with my team for me.
Well, I'm glad you joined. What were you going to say, Ross?
Oh, just those social connections, maintaining social connections. Yeah, because we could get so involved in what we're doing. Yeah, like you say, your identity isn't just a caregiver. You still are a person and have interests and hobbies, and keeping those going with friendships is important.
Yeah. There's a couple more in the comments that I'll just put here. So one of them was the CPA. I think that's a great one to add. And then another thing that they put under more team members is that they have a yoga group. So like a fitness group or a gym. I think maybe that would be under physical, but I do think that it's a great one to have. I know that people at my gym started off as strangers, and now they've really helped me in some of my most vulnerable circumstances. So I would add that to my list as well. Ron?
So we're in a situation where we have adult children. They're younger adults, but they're college age and out of college. And when especially with your younger, you have your own little situations, dramas, blah blah blah, and it required a conversation amongst us, as time went on, for them to take responsibility for things that, maybe in the past we would have kind of shared or, not made a big deal about. Now it's time, you know what? I can't carry your burden. This is a problem. I understand it. I'm here to help you, but you have to take responsibility for it. And that has, at times been challenging as a parent because you want to, do what's best for them. But considering the circumstances, it's actually good for them too. And I can tell you that, in the long run, it has proven itself to be, beneficial. But it was it was an effort that we had to take. It just didn't happen naturally. Because of the circumstance and the pressures that we were all feeling, it was like, okay, guys, we need to sit down and talk and, and work this out. And so I think somewhere that has to be captured because family is critically important and to some of us, at least in my situation. And,
I realized I muted myself. Yes, I completely agree. And actually, I would it was kind of, my aunt and I both help take care of my grandma. And so luckily I get to share that burden with someone. Oh, Dolores, happy 6th birthday to your birthday boy. That was in the chat. She has to go. Thank you for being here, Dolores. Anyway, I was one of those adult children that they were like, you live in this area, you need to step up. Rest of the families in Bolivia, like you love your abuela, so can you help? And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. So I'm glad that they were brave enough to say something to me though, because I do have a kid at home and I do work full time and I do have a church calling that takes a lot of my time. And this is now another part of my life that I'm really grateful to have. So with that being said, I know we're kind of running low on time. I'm really sorry. Actually, I'm not that sorry because it was an awesome discussion. But the thing that I want to end with, and again, I will download that we created. And if anybody has more people they want to add to that list, just email me. But I wanted to end this with, why do you love being a caregiver? I know we talked about the physical risks and the emotional risks and the mental risks and everything that comes with being a caregiver, but I want to leave this meeting thinking about, why do we enjoy being caregivers? What blessings or good experiences, great experiences have come because we are caregivers? Does anyone have something that they would like to share about that?
I would
I won't be
say,
back. So go ahead,
oh,
Bob.
go ahead, Ron.
I was just going to say that I'm wired to fix it. And so this is an opportunity for me to be able to contribute in some fashion. And it's for somebody that I care deeply for, somebody that I stood before God and said that I would be there in thick and thin and till death do us part. And I take that very seriously.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Barb, would you like to say something?
Yes, I'd like to add that even though caregiving it can be difficult, there's an intimacy that you gain with that person that no one else has. As far as my mother is concerned, I got to see her. We had a difficult relationship. She wasn't an easy person, and I'm sure I wasn't easy to her. But toward the end, I had a closeness with her that I wouldn't have had I not been the one taking care of her or mostly responsible for her. So I'm really thankful for that. And the same goes, I guess, I think, like with a spouse, it's the same. It's something that you grow closer through participating in with that person, because hard things are what draw us close. So I think there's a lot to be gained in that sense.
I completely agree. Andy?
So I did some caregiving for my dad when he passed a couple of years ago, and I really felt there it was just, I was repaying everything that he gave to me in my life and provided for me and the opportunities, et cetera. So it was like a no-brainer. And then with my wife, it's kind of like what you said, Ron, you know, I mean, this is what a relationship, a marriage is about. Through sickness and through health, you're there for each other. And so it's a no-brainer. I don't even question it. And using the word love being a caregiver, I don't know if I'd say love being a caregiver, because none of us, our spouses and our loved ones, they don't want to be going through this either. But
Right.
There's never any doubt this is what you do. And you sign up for this when you enter into a relationship such as we all have.
Yeah. I guess I should have phrased it, what do you love about being a caregiver? But, it's very Audrey.
I'm just kidding, Nate. Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Thank you. Thank you so much to each of you for being vulnerable with me and for sharing your thoughts. One last thought from Randy. She said, I've benefited from the challenges of learning about my mother's illness and through getting to know great people I've met through support groups. And I would echo that. Is being a part of this is, to me, the word that I would use is beautiful. Just being able to share vulnerable, shared experiences together and being able to laugh together and have a good time at the same time. This isn't all about myeloma, and I don't know. I really appreciate your participation and your vulnerability in sharing with me today. We're going to close with just a few announcements. Our next meeting will be on July 15th, 2021. We are going to we talked about the Myeloma Coach Program today. There will be a coach summit that's live for all the myeloma coaches in Park City. This coach summit is a training that happens annually. It's also a little bit of a celebration. Roz is in charge of it. She's done a great job. So that's going to be, our event will be live streamed from Park City, and it will be a caregiver panel. So this is one that I would, this is an event that I would ask you to invite your loved one to be with you, because we're going to be talking about what are some challenges that the caregiver has that the patient might not be aware of. Just so that they can get, from our perspective, what are the things that we love about caregiving, but what are the other things? Of course, not making anyone feel bad either, but just creating that sense of we're in this together, and both sides are cared for. Oh, I don't know why that happened. So I will give you more details about timing and how to view that event as we get closer. Hopefully within the next week or so, I will give you information on that. We also have other upcoming events within our myeloma crowd community. Because we're over on time, I'll just let you look at this and also let you know that it will be coming in the with the slides and the recording. The link to sign up for any of these events is at the bottom of the slide. And just thank you again to our sponsors, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Karyopharm Therapeutics, AbbVie, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Genentech, Oncopeptides, and Takeda Oncology. And thank you to each of you. This was better than I hoped. So thank you for your participation, for being here. I really appreciate it. So thank you, and hope that you have a great rest of your night.